think about this for a second. You've got a room full of really sharp people, missionaries, church leaders, and they get asked this question: which parts get you to reproduction?
Yeah.
And apparently, it kind of stumped them at first.
Yeah.
But the answer really unlocked something fundamental about how movements actually spread. Welcome to the deep dive.
So today we're digging into something fascinating based on material one of you shared. It's about a training framework, T4T, training for trainers.
Right, T4T.
And it has, 7 components. They're all important for making disciples, definitely. But we're going to zoom in on what they started calling the bold parts.
Bold parts, okay.
Yeah, these are the few key elements that seem most effective for creating that ripple effect, training trainers who train trainers.
So this is kind of a shortcut then to understanding the engine of multiplication, whatever you might be involved in.
Exactly, that's the idea.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive. Let's pinpoint these 4 boldy parts. Yeah. Let's really get the why behind them, why they work so well, and see how they help people become multipliers, not just learners.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's unpack this. The material we're looking at really makes a point that, yes, all 7 parts of T4T add value, but 4 just stand out for the specific goal of reproduction. Trainees starting new groups and actually training others the same way. They even call them red parts originally, circled in red in the docs.
Yeah, for emphasis, we're calling them bold parts.
Right, boldy. Easier to say.
And what's insightful is that distinction. It's not saying the other 3 parts aren't good or necessary for, overall growth and care.
Sure.
But these 4, accountability, vision casting, practice, and set goals, and pray, they seem specifically designed to kickstart that cascade of training.
Okay, let's dive into accountability first. Right. Now, sometimes that word feels a bit, heavy.
Yeah, it can.
But the material talks about loving accountability. It's meant to push the group forward, specifically towards training more trainers. Less judgment, more momentum.
Precisely. It's about forward motion. And the way it's structured in T4T, it's actually progressive. The questions they ask you, they evolve over time.
How so?
Well, they intentionally shift your focus towards multiplication. So maybe at first, the questions are pretty personal about your own efforts. Who are you witnessing to? Who is believed? Simple start.
Okay.
But then they build. The next step is sort of, okay, when are you training them in this same process? Right. That's moving you into being a starter.
Ah, gotcha. So it levels up.
Exactly. Then it goes to, how are these new believers doing? Are they witnessing and winning others? Now you're looking at the trainer level.
Right.
And it keeps going. When are they training their groups? That's trainer of trainers.
Right.
And even how are the trainers you are training doing and training their new groups? That gets you to trainer of trainers who trains trainers.
That's quite a ladder. It's built right into the questions. You can see how that keeps the goal crystal clear.
You really hit it there. It's not just checking boxes. It's constantly reinforcing the expectation. Learning isn't the end. Passing it on, that's the goal. It taps into that desire to see things grow beyond yourself.
Okay, so that's accountability. The next bold D part is vision casting. And you mentioned this isn't like a sales pitch?
No, not at all. The material's clear. In T4T, this is about genuinely building faith. Faith in what God can actually do through the trainees.
Keeping the big picture, God's purpose, right in front of them.
Exactly. And there's this really powerful tool they mention, a vignette by Ying Kai called the 4 calls.
Oh, 4 calls.
Yeah, it's designed to be really vivid, memorable. It connects with that internal drive, that why behind sharing your faith and training others, hits different angles.
Okay, what are the calls?
So the first is the call from above. Think Isaiah 6, Mark 16, God's command. Go share the gospel.
Right.
And the question is direct. Do you hear the voice from heaven above? Puts it right there.
Powerful.
Okay. Then number 2 is the call from below. This references Luke 16, the story of the rich man.
Oh, yeah.
And the question is pretty stark. Do you hear the lost in hell below crying out for you to tell their families about the gospel? Adds that sense of urgency,
Definitely brings the stakes into focus. What's third?
Third is the call from outside. This draws on Paul's vision in Act 16, the man from Macedonia.
Okay.
Interpreted here as the spiritual cry of people who are lost, needing help. So the question is, do you hear the call from lost people outside calling you to tell them the good news?
Looking outwards.
Seeing the need out there.
Exactly. And the 4th call, finally, is the call from inside. This is straight from Paul in 1 Corinthians 9, where he says, "Woe is me if I don't share. I am under compulsion."
That inner drive.
Yes. So the question hits that personal conviction. Do you hear the call from inside your own heart telling you to speak? And they even suggest using hand motions up, down, out, in to make it stick. Up, down, out, in. Simple, memorable. That's a really comprehensive way to ignite that motivation.
It really is. It covers the command, the consequence, the compassion, and the compulsion.
Okay, so that's vision casting. Then we have practice. This one feels maybe a bit more obvious.
Well, yes and no. It seems obvious, but it's amazing how often it gets shortchanged. You really can't expect someone to train others well if they haven't practiced doing it themselves right, in a safe space.
True. Need to work out the kinks.
Exactly. Practice builds confidence, sure, but also competence. It's how you ensure the content and maybe even more importantly, the expectations of the whole process get passed on faithfully.
So it's about quality control for the next generation, too.
In a way, yes. The material really hammers this. It's just highly unlikely a trainee becomes a trainer without enough hands-on practice during the training. It's the bridge.
Okay. Accountability, vision casting, practice. The fourth boldy part is set goals and pray.
Right. This is about being intentional. Taking specific time to ask, okay, God, what's next? What should I do? Then actually writing down those goals.
Writing them down makes a difference.
It does. And then, crucially, having the group pray over those specific goals. It creates this shared commitment. The material calls it a holy reverence and anticipation.
I like that. So are these goals about personal holiness or?
Well, while the middle part of the T4T meeting focuses on obeying the Bible lesson just learned, the goals set here in this final part are usually very action-focused on multiplication.
Oh, okay.
Typically, they center on who specifically will you witness to this week and who will you train and how will you start. It connects the learning directly to outward action.
That makes sense. And there was an anecdote about this.
Yeah, a really powerful one from a closed country. This person, D, brings L to a training session literally the day after L came to faith.
The day after. Wow.
Yeah. And D knew L's physical birthday, her new spiritual birthday, and her purpose. She is here for training. That was the mindset.
Incredible intentionality.
And immediately they were talking about third-generation believers because Elle was already planning who in her network, her uikos, she was going to share with and eventually train.
So that story really shows how accountability and goal setting with prayer can just ignite things.
Absolutely. It shows the potential speed when these elements are really embraced. Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, I think.
Oh.
What happens when these boldy parts get missed? Accidentally, maybe, but missed nonetheless.
Okay, like the time pressure scenario.
Exactly. Let's use their example. Meeting's supposed to be 7 to 9 p.m. Doesn't start till 7:45. You've lost 45 minutes.
Happens all the time.
Right. So the question they pose is, before you knew these were the bold, critical parts, which of the 7 T4T components would you instinctively cut to try and catch up?
Okay. If I didn't know better, vision casting might feel a bit fluffy. Or less concrete, maybe. I might trim that.
That's a common one they point out. Least familiar, maybe feels less essential in the moment. What else?
Accountability can feel awkward sometimes. Maybe just do a super quick surface-level check-in.
Yep. Superficial accountability is what they call it. Check the box, move on. Another common casualty.
Okay. And practice takes time. If the first part ran long and the lesson took a while, practice is probably getting squeezed.
Definitely. You look at the clock, it's nearly 9. Got to wrap up. So practice gets cut or rushed badly.
And the set goals and pray? Maybe you just do a quick closing prayer, but it's not the same as that intentional commissioning over specific goals.
Exactly. So the big irony here is that the very things most needed for multiplication are often the first things dropped when we feel pressured.
Wow.
Well,
That's sobering. It highlights a conflict between immediate needs, like finishing on time, and the long-term goal of reproduction.
and the reason the material suggests is often an unconscious shift in goals for that meeting. Instead of focusing on developing trainers, we default to other good things. Making sure everyone understands the lesson, having good fellowship, maybe a great worship time.
All valuable things, but not the primary goal of T4T.
Right. So what's the end result? You cut the boldy parts out of that rushed meeting. What are you left with?
Well, you'd have the pastoral care bit at the start, maybe worship, and the Bible lesson.
Exactly. Pastoral care, worship, new lesson Bible study. What does that sound like?
That sounds like pretty much any standard small group meeting, or a Bible study.
Yeah.
Or Sunday school.
Precisely. And here's the kicker phrase from the material. These traditional structures rarely get to reproduction of trainers.
Ouch.
Yeah. They serve other important purposes, absolutely, but they don't typically create that exponential growth of training trainers.
So we default to what's familiar, what feels intuitive.
But a CPM, a church planting movement, the kind T4T aims for, is often counterintuitive, as the material says. It requires being really intentional about these specific, sometimes less comfortable, bold D parts.
Okay, so the solution seems almost too simple.
It kind of is, in theory. The solution is don't leave out the bold part.
Just don't do it.
Pretty much. The guidance is aim to include all 7 parts in the 3/3 format every single time. Consistency is vital.
But what about when time is genuinely short? You can't just magically create more time.
Right. And the advice isn't skip parts, it's shorten parts.
Yeah.
Try to shrink each of the 7 components proportionally, keeping the rough 3/3 balance.
Okay, so if you only have, say, 75 minutes instead of 90?
Then each third gets about 25 minutes. That might mean you only cover half the lesson you planned.
So less content.
Potentially, yes. They even mention trying super short, like 60-minute lunch hour T4Ts. You just have to drastically lower your content expectations, but keep all the elements.
Gotcha.
And the rule of thumb they offer is cut content before you cut the boldy parts. Give people just enough to obey and pass on. That's the priority.
Better to cover less ground thoroughly, including practice and goals, than cover more ground superficially.
That's the idea. And also maybe schedule more time than you think you need in the first place. Build in a buffer.
Good practical advice. Now, you mentioned an American example, Antioch.
Yeah, Antioch Community Church in Waco, Texas, and their global arm, AMI, Antioch Ministries International, a big, active ministry already doing lots of good work, church planting, missions.
Okay.
But they had this realization, all the many good things they were doing could actually, unintentionally, pull them away from the core elements needed for really explosive world evangelization type growth.
Interesting. Even good things can distract from the best things, in a sense.
Exactly. So they undertook this major, 3-year process to retool, to become more CPM focused, and they implemented T4T for their people both at home and on the field.
A big shift for an established group.
Huge. And the results in Waco were pretty dramatic. They mentioned over 300 salvations in the first year, really targeting neighborhoods.
Oh.
In one neighborhood, they saw something like 70 salvations in just 2 weeks. But crucially, they had teams trained and ready to follow up immediately with T4T.
Connecting evangelism directly to training.
Yes. So new groups started budding right away. They even saw third-generation believers emerge really quickly from just one evangelistic push.
That's fast.
It is. And what's really useful for others, I think, is how they integrated T4T into their existing small groups, their life groups.
Okay, how do they do that? Did they replace them?
No, they adapted them. They looked at their life groups and realized, okay, we're doing good discipleship here, but we're missing some of these boldy parts. Accountability wasn't always sharp. Vision wasn't always cast for multiplication. Practice wasn't built in.
So they added those elements back in as
Yeah.
expectations.
Exactly. They reintroduced the boldy parts as clear expectations for how life groups should function if they wanted to be part of multiplication.
That makes sense. Build on what you have.
And they even made another shift. Some groups started meeting every other week
To give people less meeting time.
to give them more time to actually go out and start new groups within their own networks, their oikos. The focus shifted from just growing the existing group bigger until it split to intentionally planting new groups out among the lost by using these boldy parts.
That's a fundamental shift in thinking, away from addition towards multiplication.
Precisely. And the outcomes. More conversions, more baptisms, more new groups starting. AMI's story is presented as this example of a major global shift happening in how churches think about starting new groups, kind of returning to that original Acts model of discipleship.
Or a return to the original discipleship revolution, as they put it. Very compelling.
Yeah.
Okay, so wrapping this up, this deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
the main takeaways about these boldy parts seem really clear now.
Yeah, I think so. Accountability, vision casting, practice, and setting goals and praying over them. These 4 are just critical drivers for getting trainers to reproduce.
They're the engine within the T4T framework.
Right. And while all 7 parts matter for the whole picture of discipleship, these 4 need that special focus, that protection, especially when time gets tight. Shorten other things first.
Don't cut the engine.
Good way to put it.
And thinking about it, this isn't just for church stuff, is it? The principles seem broader.
Absolutely. Think about any situation where you want skills or ideas to spread, where you want to create multipliers. Business training, community projects, even just sharing a hobby you're passionate about.
Hmm.
That combination of clear expectations and accountability, inspiring vision for what's possible, hands-on practice, and getting commitment through goals and support, those principles are pretty universal for effective multiplication.
So maybe a final thought for you listening.
Yeah.
Look at the groups or initiatives you're part of.
Yeah.
Are the equivalents of these bold E parts present? Are they intentional? Accountability, vision, practice, goal setting with support.
And if they're not, what might happen if they were introduced? What could that unlock? Something definitely worth reflecting on.